What's up guys, my name is Jason. In today's video, I'm going to be reacting to an interview about Square stock. Now this is a stock that I currently own, but I haven't done a video on them in a while, so I thought this would be a fun video to make. If you're wondering how much I own in Square, I'll have a card somewhere in the top of the screen of my $10,000 stock portfolio where I go in depth on why I own Square and how much I have in Square. But before we get started, if you want to get started investing or you already do invest, go ahead and use the first link in the description to get a free stock from Robinhood when you open an account with them. Not only does it help me and the channel out, but you get a free stock that can be worth up to $200. But anyways, let's get back to the video.
All right, welcome back to the final round here on Yahoo Finance. Time now for our call of the day. Today we are talking about Oppenheimer's latest on shares of Square. The firm is upgrading the stock to an outperform rating, putting a $185 price target on the stock. And Dan Roberts, I know you are writing about this call from Opco on Square. And I guess as they see it, basically Square finds themselves, I don't want to make too many comparisons to this company, but in a Shopify-like situation where they're benefiting from everyone else moving online and sort of catching up maybe to where Square had positioned themselves. Is that maybe a fair way to kind of enter into where Oppenheimer gets so bullish on the stock?
Well, I think that's fair because increasingly Shopify and Square are competitors, although probably Square would say, well, wait a minute, we came first long before Shopify. So more people, I think, might compare Shopify these days to what Square has done. But look, all of the things highlighted in this very bullish note are the things that we've always talked about with Square, the ecosystem. And that is kind of Square's favorite term for the idea that it serves both sides of the sale equation. It serves sellers, i.e. merchants, and mostly small businesses. And then it serves consumers, shoppers, either at point of sale when you use Square products or with Cash App. But really, this note is based around Cash App and its growth, which, I think in New York, we can tend to be very regional focused and think that Venmo is the end all be all. But Cash App is number one in a lot of markets, and it's grown very nicely. And then interestingly, some real mention here in this note of the Bitcoin gains within Cash App, which we know is an obsession of Jack Dorsey's. Some have criticized it as too much of an obsession.
Hey, leave my guy Jack alone here. He, along with a bunch of other people, see Bitcoin as like how the debit card was first introduced as a way to spend money and to save money. And with Bitcoin, you can actually make money on top of that just by holding it. That's why I made almost half of the revenue for just Q2 of this year, because you can buy Bitcoin on Cash App. And Bitcoin is going to have a much bigger part in cashless societies as we move more into the future. Just like how a lot more people are realizing that going electric for the vehicle is the future. Although I do have more conviction in that than Bitcoin, I still have a very strong conviction in Bitcoin and Cash App.
But last quarter, Square saw profit from allowing Bitcoin trading in Cash App. Its profit from Bitcoin was about 17 million. Tiny, but up 710% from its profit from Bitcoin a year earlier. And its Bitcoin revenue was up 600%. Now that was because Bitcoin prices have been up amid the pandemic. More people were interested. But all of this aside, what this note really is to me is a bet that small businesses emerging from the pandemic are going to need to digitize their businesses. Now, of course, we already know that. I mean, if you didn't realize before the pandemic that e-commerce was where everything was headed, well, you were sleeping. But now everyone sees it. I mean, we've talked so much about the huge gains that big retailers have seen with e-commerce amid the pandemic. Walmart, Target, Best Buy, Urban Outfitters, Dick's, Etsy, which is online only, Wayfair, which is online only. Now, of course, those are bigger businesses. But point being, the lesson applies to small businesses, the types of merchants that are Square's bread and butter as well. A ton, unfortunately, hundreds of thousands of small businesses have gone out of business amid the pandemic. But those that are still around and have survived are going to have to really focus on e-commerce coming out of the pandemic. And so this note is a bet that Square can be a winner by serving those businesses that'll be prioritizing e-commerce. It's got a hefty price target on the stock of like 185, whereas the all-time high is 166. And Square, interestingly, and I would argue kind of quietly, is up like 170% in 2020 so far.
I agree with the analyst here. Like he said, companies are going to have to digitize their businesses. And this is something that Square has done an incredible job with. And they don't get enough credit for that. Square's made the transition from brick and mortar to online expansion so seamless for their merchants, and that's why their retention rate is so high. And in the long term, the more these companies keep growing, Square sets themselves up to grow with them. So the more transactions they process, the more Square makes. And that's a win-win-win. I'm saying this because not only Square and the seller are winning, people like me and you, retail investors, are also winning too, because the more Square makes, the more we make too. It's just that simple.
And then Dan, a big part of this note is the Cash App for Square. And I guess I mean, am I understanding this incorrectly? Maybe as someone who doesn't follow the company as closely as you do, I'm like, well, I use Venmo, so that's basically I won't use cash. But it seems like there's a much larger opportunity here for Square to kind of use that ecosystem of users, and they have a great breakdown of profit by cohort, and they're clearly getting better at expanding what is in the Cash App, and that really seems to be a linchpin of this call.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, it's really all about the digital wallet race, right? And I'm glad you mentioned that. Here's the key line with what you're asking about. So we believe by reinvesting profits from prior Cash App cohorts, combined with its seller ecosystem, I mentioned that, Square can develop significant network effects and products that will be challenging for other neobanks to replicate in the digital wallet space. So really an advantage that Square has over banks. And we know that everyone is in this digital wallet race. Cash App now, I mentioned the comparison to Venmo, but really it does a lot more than just peer-to-peer payments. You can withdraw money. You can use it as a debit card. There's a Cash App debit card. And as I mentioned, you can buy and trade Bitcoin in there. So a number of these new features, steady growth, of course, not without its competitors in the digital wallet space, but that is a key to the note as well.
Another thing that he didn't mention, which is probably one of the most important things, is Square's global opportunity. Why the hell do you think they bought Verse? You thought it would just look cool on their resume to be bought out by another company? No, Verse allows Square to not go through all of those banking processes that they had to go through in the US, which saves them money and time, all in an effort to make banking accessible for everyone on the planet.
Yeah, I mean, Dan, in many ways, you can also compare it to Robinhood. You can also compare it to Acorns. You can think about it as supposedly the one-stop shop. And as you say, that ecosystem that's supposed to encapsulate all of your fintech needs. I do want to bring up some news today as well. Square did announce a commitment to invest $100 million into Black communities. Of course, Jack Dorsey has been very vocal about supporting Black Lives Matter, also committed $1 billion of his own Square stock in coronavirus-related issues. A lot of them focus on underserved, underprivileged communities. And I think this is particularly interesting, guys, because we've talked about so-called conscious capitalism for a decade now, right? Supposedly this has been in the works. It's the underpinning of the future of stakeholder capitalism. But I do feel like we have to give Dorsey some credit here because he is baking it into the business model.
Imagine working for a CEO who puts a third of his money down to help not only his employees, but those all over the world struggling with something that all of us are struggling with. This is something a true leader does, and it makes everyone around him feel like there's way more work to be done. And this type of unselfishness builds so much more trust between him and his employees, and it makes them have a more sense of purpose in his company. But on that note, I'll wrap it up on that. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Also, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't already. But with that being said, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.